Remembering the Kana, Hiragana, Lesson 1. The very first of the Hiragana that we're going to look at is what we write in Romaji as just a letter N. This is the kanji it came from, but it's been simplified from that kanji to be much simpler. Just looks like that. The sound of this Hiragana is and you make it with basically just your mouth closed and you go like that. We write it with the letter N in Romaji, but all it does is end a syllable with the sound N. When we start putting some words together, we'll see how it works. For now, we just have to remember, okay, that this is an N. So how can we remember that? Well, if you notice, it looks a lot like if we write a cursive N in regular Roman letters. So if you write a very cursive N like that, of course this is just, normal handwriting. It looks pretty similar. So that's how to remember the sound M. The next hiragana that we're going to learn is the one that we write with a Romaji letter I. But we don't pronounce it I, we pronounce it E. And this is how we write it. So compared to the kanji that it came from, it's a lot simpler. So how do we remember this one? Well, if you think about when you write an I, like a cursive I, we do one stroke and then we do another. And just like this little dot is kind of to the right of the first stroke that we write, so very similarly, our hiragana does kind of the same thing. So to do the hiragana again, I'll do it in red. It looks like that. E. This is pronounced E. And now that we know two hiragana, we can learn a couple words. First, we can do this. E plus an E together makes the word E, which means good. If we add the letter N that we learned last time, we get in. And that is the word for institution. It means some other things too, but that's one word it can mean. So when we pronounce in, and now we get to see how this letter N really is pronounced. It's not really a letter N sound. What it is the nasalization of the vowel sound that comes before that, which is a very fancy way of just saying, you don't really close your mouth all the way, usually, when you say this sound. So instead of saying in, which isn't right, you have to let your mouth slowly close together, almost towards an M, but not quite. So I'll do it one more time. In. And here we have our first words, written all in hiragana. Now, we're going to learn the hiragana for the sound ku. Ku. And this is the kanji it came from. It has been simplified to look like that. Ku. So, how can we remember that? Well, if you look at it like this, if we do something like this, doesn't it look like Pac-Man? You know how Pac-Man, he gobbles up those little things? So here's Pac-Man gobbling up these little things, and as he's doing it, he's going coo 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 like that. So now we're really starting to use our imaginations in a kind of ridiculous way. But now that we've done that, you can probably see it's going to be pretty hard to forget Pac-Man going coo 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 and making a sound just like that while he's gobbling up those little O's. Looks kind of like if it were the word coo, coo, like that, coo. So the way we pronounce it is ku, ku. Let's spell some more words now. First, iku, which means to go. Iku. Kun, kun. This is a suffix for young men, rather than san, which you might have heard before, meaning Mr. or Mrs. Kun is just for young men instead. And our last one is kui, which means regret. So already we're able to spell a whole bunch of words with just a few hiragana. Next, the sound he. He comes from that kanji it's been simplified a great deal to look like that in hiragana. So how do we remember hey? Well, doesn't it look like a haystack? Yeah, it looks a little bit like a haystack. So we can decorate it a little bit, have, you know, a little nice little thing, make it look like it's a haystack. So that's how we can remember hey. And for some words that we can start spelling now, let us do hang, which means strange. And then we have hey, which means flat. Now we're going to learn how to write no. Looks just like that. And if you notice, it looks a lot like the universal symbol for no, as a no spoken. And you saw how we wrote it. It's just one stroke, but it looks just like that. Very easy to recognize. Let's spell some more words now. Can you read it? Hey no. Nonno. Non no. Non no. Nonno. Kuno. Kuno. We are able to spell a lot of words now with just a few hiragana. It's really exciting. For the hiragana, for ke, we write it like this. Just like that. 1, 2, 3. So we have ke. On the left side here, doesn't this look a lot like a cape drooping down from, I don't know, maybe Superman's cape or something? And on the right, to me, this looks an awful like a dagger. You can do that, you know, make a blade, and now we have, well, there we go, sort of a dagger-like sword there. So, we have our flowing cape coming down, plus a dagger. So we have the phrase cloak and dagger. Let's change it a little bit. Let's make it cape and dagger, cape and dagger, cape and dagger, cape and dagger. So that's how we can remember ke. Let's spell a few more words. Ke, ke. And some of you might notice right away, this is ke-i, ke-i. Ke-i, we don't pronounce that combination as ke. We don't do that. Instead, this is the way to write ke, along ke sound. If we write it in Romaji, we're not going to write in Romaji very much. Romaji we want to not use ever again because it's terrible for Japanese. But just as an example, to show you the Romaji version, that would be ke, just like here on its own. But to make it ke, the long ke, this is how we write it. We have the hiragana i. Try to read it. Noke. Noke. And this is ken-i. Ken-i. And we'll just use a little Romaji again to show you how we can write this. Now, we're not going to write it just like that in Romaji, because this looks like, the second part looks like another syllable we're going to learn later, ni. But it's not ni, it's ken plus i. So what we can do is write a little apostrophe right there to separate it. That's the usual convention we have for Romaji. Again, Romaji are terrible for Japanese, but this is how we do it when we write this kind of combination, when we have ken plus i. So an that's ending a syllable followed by a vowel. We separate it with that apostrophe. Ken-i, ken-i. Alright, now we have the vowel sound a, a. Well, this is how we write that. Simplified from that more complicated looking kanji, we have a dagger, which remember before, plus, remember that looking kind of like the no from before. But instead, when we have it in a combination like this, rather than calling it the no, like the no smoking sign, let's call it a no parking sign specifically. So when we have it combined with other pieces, it looks kind of like that. Well, it's a little bit more like that. And we'll call it a no parking sign. And if you see here, we have this little part sticks above. When we had a regular no before, it doesn't stick above, but here it does. And we think of that as a signpost on which the no parking sign is hung. So we're starting to really use some vivid imagination. Not only that, let's really use some vivid imagination for this hiragana. So we have a dagger and then a no parking sign. Imagine on a pond there is an otter. Why an otter? Ah, that's why, an otter. So the otter is on the lake and he has a bunch of daggers on his belly. He's floating there, and around this pond or lake are a bunch of no parking signs. And he, for whatever reason, just goes and throws them into all the no parking signs. And he's very happy about that. And that's how you can remember ah. Some words we can spell. Ano, which means that. Aku, which means bad in some combinations of words. Akeno, which isn't a word in its own right. Not all these are words, but they're good spelling practice. Akeno. So just remember that otter and those daggers in the pond. Now we have the syllable ko. That's the kanji that it comes from. When it got simplified, it ended up like that. Ko. And something to point out, first of all, is that this little bit here, it isn't totally necessary. What it is from is all hiragana and the kanji were unlike our Roman letters. Roman letters, like the Greek and Phoenician letters which came before them, were meant to be chiseled into marble and stone mostly. So they had these serifings, these features which I've just highlighted in red, like you would see around the K. You wouldn't see it very much on the O, but weren't meant to be written by hand with a flowing utensil like a pen or a marker to begin with. They're meant to be chiseled in stone. And equally, Japanese characters, whether the kana or kanji, weren't meant to be written on paper with a pen and pencil. They were meant to be dripped vertically onto paper with the ink brush. That's completely different. So when the ink would drip, as it inevitably would, it would trail a little bit. And some more stylized and cursive versions of this hiragana and others, you see that ink drip, and sometimes it can go pretty far. And I kind of highlighted in red there what it might do. So, how do we remember ko? Well, imagine, if you will, combs. So we have one frame of one comb, another frame of another, and here is a teeth of a comb, and here's another one. So here's a couple of combs that we can use. So lady can brush her hair with those. And ko, combs, like that. That's how we can remember it. For some words, let us spell kono, kon, keiko. Kono means this. Kon also kind of means this in certain word combinations. And keiko is a name. Remember, the way we make a long e sound is we add this hiragana for e, right? Ke-i, keiko, keiko. For the syllable ni, we're going to have to use some special imagination. First part, we have our familiar cape or cloak. That's come back. And then we have a slightly smaller version of ko, of the combs. Remember the combs? Okay, so now we have those two combs, and let's get creative. Let me do this. So I'm going to do it again. Here we go. All right. So we have our combs, right? They look like that. There's one comb, there's another. Now, imagine this. You're sitting and you have two combs, which for some reason they've gotten glued to your kneecaps. So they're stuck on your knees, and if your legs happen to come a little bit together like that, the combs interlock, and then your kneecaps are stuck together. And, well, what better way to prevent that from happening than taking your cloak and just wrapping it right in between those two combs. So you're sitting down, you get your cloak in between your kneecaps, and then the combs don't interlock anymore. And then your knees are okay. Knee. So the next time you hear the sound knee, let that totally ludicrous scene just come to your mind. It's silly, but it works. Let's spell some words. Let us spell ni, which is a way to say a person or people. Kuni. Niko. Just like that. Congratulations, you've successfully completed the first lesson of Hiragana, and you've learned 9 Hiragana. Here they are. I, he, ku, ke, no, a, ko, ni. Isn't that awesome? Now we know 9 Hiragana, and since we've attached some kind of silly stories to them, it's going to be really easy to remember them every time you see them. Especially if, as we've been going along here, you've been rewriting these examples, practicing your handwriting. It's not necessary to rewrite these hundreds of times. You can. That's one way to really get the groove of memory to work. But a much better way, as you're quickly discovering, is that using a creative imagination, like the ku looks like the ku, you can sound Pac-Man makes when he goes ku 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 ku, and he eats up all those little things that he eats. Or that, hey, looks like a haystack. Or the really silly one with the otter, with his daggers and going into the no parking signs. So using that, it's if you're really thinking of those images and they're sticking with you, you remember them. What's going to happen is as you use these hiragana and you see them more, you remember the sound, ko, ni, he, whatever it is, instantly. And those helping guides that you use, that you're spending all this time now thinking of these complicated stories, it's going to work. But what's going to happen is those stories will fade away. The less and less they're needed, those neural connections will just kind of go down here, and then the more direct connection of this image to the sound, or the sound to the image, is what's going to happen in your brain. And it's going to be a really cool thing. Just to do a little check, can you read these words? I'll give you a chance, and then we'll do it together. Iken. Inko. Kuni. Noku. Ahen. Kono. If you were able to read those as quick as I wanted you to read them before I gave you the answer, you're doing great. So, if you are ready to go on to lesson 2, if you're brand new to hiragana, you should take a break right now. You have all these interesting new images floating around your brain. Take a 30-minute break and then come back to lesson 2.